Yeah.
Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. So close, yet so far. That has to be what Georgia is thinking, as they missed out on winning the SEC and making the college football playoff for the second year in a row. Today we take a look at the Bulldogs' schedule to see if they can make a return trip to the college football playoff, their first since 2017, as the Bulldogs are ranked 5th in our way too early top 25. And we mentioned that Georgia did make the college football playoff back in 2017, the year they won the SEC and made it to the national championship game before falling to the hands of Nick Saban and Alabama. In 2018, they made it back to the SEC championship, but fell to Nick Saban and Alabama yet again. And then last year, they made the SEC championship again, but this time fell to the hands of Ed Orgeron and Joe Burrow, who nobody was going to defeat in 2019. So back-to-back years, they have had back-to-back SEC championship losses and back-to-back Sugar Bowl appearances. But 2019 actually concluded with a win in their bowl game over Baylor, and now they're gearing up for what is going to be a very big 2020 with very high expectations down in Athens. And while they lose so much across the board, both on offense and on defense, they do have plenty of talent returning, and they landed a key transfer in Jamie Newman, the transfer quarterback from Wake Forest, to replace Jake Fromm. He's going to be paired with Samir White, replacing DeAndre Swift at running back, and a pair of two very solid receivers in George Pickens and Dominic Blaylock. As we all know, Kirby Smart, being the defensive mind that he is, Georgia will once again field one of the best defenses, not just in the SEC, but in the country as well. And their quest to return to the SEC championship and hopefully return to the college football playoff begins in Atlanta on Labor Day Monday, taking on Virginia. And we talked about this game in our Week 1 games video. We kind of broke down some of the marquee matchups of the first week of the season, and this one was up there. And we said we wish this game had been played last year just because of how good Virginia was last year. We think it would have made for a better matchup. Not many people are giving the Cavaliers a fighting chance, but this is a fantastic opportunity for Jamie Newman to kind of break in his shoes a little bit, facing off against a former ACC rival, as he did come over from Wake Forest of the ACC, but breaking in his shoes against a Power 5 opponent at a neutral site to get geared up for this very big season. They play Eastern Tennessee State in Week 2, not too worried about that, but then the big one comes on Week 3. September 19th, Georgia travels to Alabama. Man, we couldn't have been blessed with a greater regular season matchup within the SEC. This very well could be a top 5 matchup just 3 weeks into the season. Obviously, a rematch of that national championship we saw a few years ago. A rematch of that SEC championship we saw just a few years ago, both being won by the Crimson Tide. And if this game was in Athens, I think more people would lean towards the Bulldogs' way. Now, of course, we're not here predicting these games. Those will come later. We're not predicting anything, but I think many will be favoring Alabama in this game. But it's going to be an intriguing one. Obviously, Bryant-Denny Stadium is not an easy place to play, but they're dealing with a lot of losses themselves. New quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, is gone. Mac Jones has to step in. They lose Henry Ruggs. They lose Jerry Jeudy. A lot of key replacements there that they're going to have to deal with. It's the same with Georgia. So this game could be a preview of the SEC championship. Let's just be honest here. Alabama could very well win the West. Georgia could win the East, and they can meet up again in December. But what a great way to really kick off this college football season, not even just about a quarter of the way through the year. So this is a game that's going to be one of the biggest on Georgia's schedule. Not the biggest, but certainly one of the biggest. Louisiana Monroe to close out September, and then they hit the bulk of SEC conference play. Vanderbilt, Auburn, Missouri before their bye week, and Vanderbilt and Auburn both coming at home. Obviously, Auburn is the most difficult opponent out of these upcoming 3 games. Vanderbilt they should take care of on the road against Missouri, a team they defeated 27-0 last year, and a team that has so much to figure out themselves. New head coach in Eli Drinkwitz, so much turnover on both sides of the ball, not really expecting a big year out of the Tigers. But we could expect a big year from Gus Malzahn and the other Tigers of Auburn. Luckily, they get to host them. Last year, Georgia had to go to Auburn, and they won 21-14. Score a little closer than the game really was, but still, escaped with a big win over their rival, and this game being played a little earlier than it usually is. Bo Nix is back. His top receivers are back. Chad Morris is in at offensive coordinator. That could be a good thing or a bad thing. But Auburn does lose a lot on the defensive side of the ball. They lose a lot along that defensive line, including Derrick Brown, who was one of the top 10 picks in this past NFL draft. It's very, very good that Georgia gets to host this game in Athens. And there's a very good chance that more than likely they will go 3-0 in these 3-game stretch before the bye week, before their biggest game of the season against Florida. For many, especially elite contenders, Alabama would be your biggest game. But because Georgia's in the East, yes, getting a win over the Crimson Tide would be great. That would be huge, without a doubt. But they don't have to worry about having a tiebreaker over the Crimson Tide by season's end. They do have to worry about having a tiebreaker or just the lead over their biggest competitor in the East, and that is Florida. These two will meet on Halloween down in Jacksonville, where Georgia defeated Florida 24-17 last year. Many think this is the year that Florida could finally jump Georgia as champions of the SEC East. And this game will more than likely decide who in fact does win that division and goes to the SEC championship and fights and continues for a chance at making the college football playoff. Because really, I don't think either Florida or Georgia is going to lose more than 2 games this year. The max either of these teams will lose is 2. The FPI projects Georgia to go 11-1. The FPI projects Florida to go 10-2. Neither will exceed that many losses. The game in Jacksonville is huge. And we said in our Florida schedule preview that we think Florida might own the offensive edge, but Georgia might very well own the defensive edge. Florida offense, Georgia defense, something got to give down in Jacksonville. This is the biggest game on the schedule. And very well could be a top 10 matchup. So Halloween's the game that needs to be circled on Georgia and Florida's calendar, even though this Alabama game will be huge regardless. To kick off November, Georgia gets a big-time revenge game against South Carolina. And we talk about those key stretches in a season. It begins here with Florida and stretches through Kentucky. So really, you've got a 4-game stretch here that's going to be the biggest for Georgia. And it's nothing compared to some of the other stretches we've seen during these scheduled previews. Obviously, Florida is going to be the toughest test out of all 4 of these and the most important out of all 4 of these. At South Carolina, we've said over and over that Will Muschamp's Gamecocks could pull off a big upset this year at home. They already upset Georgia last year in Athens, 20-17 in double overtime. That was one of the biggest upsets and surprises of the entire 2019 college football season. Does South Carolina have another big-time upset in them, especially if Georgia is in the hunt for the SEC East crown and the playoff? We always talk about when big games like this happen, like the game against Florida, the next game is always very dangerous because either you win this game and you're on a high, maybe you get caught off guard, maybe you're too cocky, maybe you're still too excited focusing on the past, or maybe you lose this game and you're distraught, you're heartbroken, your mind's not in the right place, and you come into that next game and you get beat because you're not focused. Even though if Georgia runs this table undefeated, loses to Florida, their season's not over by any means because Florida could still slip up. Sometimes it's hard to get that through your players' heads. I'm not saying South Carolina is going to pull off the upset, but I am saying that they did it last year. Don't put it past them that they could give Georgia a run for their money again in 2020. Tennessee at home on November 14th. Georgia annihilated them 43-14 last year, but a Tennessee team that's certainly taking steps in the right direction under Jeremy Pruitt. Certainly not a game that Georgia can afford to overlook. And then at Kentucky. a team that they only defeated 21-0 last year in Athens. And it was close for over a half. Really, Georgia didn't really break free until about the third quarter of that game. In Kentucky this year, Mark Stoops doing a phenomenal job with the Wildcats once again, is probably going to be a top 3 team, could be a top 3 team in the SEC East. I think they're going to battle for that spot with Tennessee. But watch out for the Wildcats. A few years ago, the SEC East championship game was in Kentucky between the Bulldogs and the Wildcats. Probably not going to be the case this year, but certainly not a team that when they're healthy you can afford to overlook and afford to have mistakes in, because Kentucky will beat you. And then they close it out with Georgia Tech, the rivalry game there. Yellow Jackets really haven't been competitive against the Bulldogs for many years now. Georgia winning this game 52-7 last year. Yellow Jackets will get there. Probably just not going to be in 2020. And this game, of course, being in Athens. We talk about that key 4-game stretch. Starts here with Florida, runs through Kentucky. If you're looking for losses, multiple losses, it would come in that stretch. Probably not going to happen. Toughest game is Florida. Second toughest, obviously, the road game at Alabama. 2 of the toughest and most important games on Georgia's schedule. And it really will determine whether or not they win the division and whether or not they can finally get over that hump and get back to the college football playoff. Football Power Index has them at 11-1 on the year. That lone loss on the road in Tuscaloosa to Nick Saban and Alabama. The Bulldogs have not had much luck against the Crimson Tide, and that goes all the way back to the Mark Richt days. Couldn't do it with Mark Richt. Haven't been able to do it with Kirby Smart. Will their luck change in 2020? Will they win the SEC East again in 2020? Will they get back to the college football playoff? The schedule lines up for them to very well do just that. So guys, thank you so much for watching us here on YouTube. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe. We appreciate your support so much. None of this is possible without viewers and subscribers and supporters like you. So please like, comment, and subscribe, and check out everything down in the description below for some exclusive college football news, content, offers that you do not want to miss. And once again, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time right here on The Gridiron Expert.